A 2014 Chevy Corvette review here in Hawaii would be incomplete without a reference to the Beach Boys song, Tack It Up, Buddy Gonna Shut You Down, the story of a drag race between a fuel-injected Stingray and a 413, or in this case, a 413 Dodge Dart. Well, the Stingray was the nickname for the second generation Corvette, which came out from 1963 to 1967. Fast forward all the way up to 2014, and that name, the Stingray, is back with the all-new C7, or 7th generation Corvette. And we're going to learn a little bit about the history of the Corvette, and maybe some parallels between the history of the Corvette and the history of rock and roll. We're going to start by popping the hood. And one thing we know about Corvettes is that the hood opens up backwards. Now, the LT1, that was the name of the all-new V8 engine that was available, 350 cubic inch in 1970. It came back as a 350 cubic inch in 1992. Now we're up to 6.2 liters in the new for 2014 LT1. The C2 Corvette, that was that second generation from 63 up until 67. That was really the high point of horsepower in the Corvette world. By 1967, you could order an L88 427 that had 435 horsepower. In fact, in the real world, it probably had over 500 horsepower. Well, we haven't seen that kind of horsepower in the Corvette in quite many years. This 6.2 liter bone stock is putting out 455 horsepower. What's amazing about it is it still gets 29 miles per gallon out on the open road. Now, taking a look at the front, the wheels on this car are not super huge. However, you can order this with the Z51 package. The Z51 package is going to bump up the size of the wheels to 20 inches along with bigger brakes. One thing about it too, it's an interesting feature, is that if you get the Z51, it actually comes with a dry sump motor. And you hear that term in racing every once in a while. What the heck does dry sump mean? It means it has an additional oil reservoir so that all the oil doesn't sit underneath the engine. And that's really important if you're racing a car and you're taking turns dramatically fast and you don't want to starve the engine of oil. Now, taking a look inside, one of the great features about the all-new C7 Corvette is that the interior is vastly nicer than its predecessor. And so it has some neat features like a new Tremec 7-speed manual transmission with a sky-high 7th gear. That's how it gets that 29 miles per gallon out on the open road. But considering a car that has both more than 450 horsepower and more than 450 foot-pounds of torque, it's unbelievable that this car actually gets 17 miles per gallon in the city. It gets a combined well over 20 miles per gallon for a car of this kind of relentless performance. It's actually unbelievable. It's much more comfortable than its predecessor in a million different ways. The seats are much more comfortable. It rides on a longer wheelbase. You know, harkening back to the 60s, the wheelbase on this car was only 98 inches. Now it's over 106 inches. Taking a look in back, well, it has 15 cubic feet of cargo space. Well, that's not a ton of cargo space, but it's not designed to be the family U-Haul either. Trips to Costco, not a problem. You have plenty of space to get all the gear you need. But unlike those muscle cars of the 60s, this car runs on standard premium octane gas. If I go back to that L88, for example, in 1967, that ran on 103 octane. So a lot of improvements in the real world over the years. But one thing about the real world is this car still has well over 450 foot-pounds of torque. And so you're going to be taking a look at a new set of rear tires probably more often than in your family sedan. Jumping back inside, let's turn it on and take a listen. Now, back in the day when the Corvette came out, it came out in 1953, and it had what's called the Blue Flame inline 6-cylinder. We'll take a look at rock and roll in that phase. The most popular band from 1953 to 1962, for young people at least, was Buddy Holly and the Crickets, and this whole new concept of rock and roll. Well, by our standards, they were kind of lightweights, and that original engine only had 150 horsepower. There was another band in England that was heavily influenced by Buddy Holly and the Crickets, so much so that they changed their name to sound just like that. And so their name was Long John and the Silver Beatles. Well, Long John and the Silver Beatles were very well traveled, and they brought back influences from all over the world. Well, so did the Corvette, as it started racing all over the world. When it came out with the C2 or second generation, it went from just a cool convertible to the real deal race car. In fact, it became the most thrilling car in the entire world and dominated the race scene in the mid-60s. Long John and the Silver Beatles did as well. They evolved and changed their name to the Silver Beatles and then just the Beatles, and became the most important rock and roll band of all time. By the end of the decade, well, things had changed, and the Corvette went into a third generation that wasn't nearly as good looking as the second generation. A lot of people found it to be a little bit ugly, to be honest with you, but it came with a huge engine. In fact, you could get all the way up to 454 cubic inches, turning this ugly thing into a great big monster. And what was going on in the rock and roll scene? Well, the band everybody wanted to know more about was Black Sabbath. The 70s come, and what happens? Well, those Black Sabbath-y bands get a little bit long in the tooth, and it becomes a little bit more glam and a little less substance. Same goes for the Corvette. By 1975, horsepower numbers were down to 165 horsepower. With the upbringing of European and international music, technology takes over, and you start having competition for the Corvette, like twin-turbo cars from around the world. And by 1992, Corvette had righted the ship, and that new LT1 for 1992 set a new course for the company. Unfortunately, everybody at Chevrolet was dying to get rid of the Corvette. But the Corvette has stayed, and the Corvette has stayed now for over 60 years, making it the single most important car of all time. If you look at the C7, wow, is it a nice car. It's not super duper expensive, but it is absolutely gorgeous. The plastic, the vinyl in here is actually a blend of vinyl and silk. It's called protein vinyl, and so it gives it a very high-end look. The carbon, well, it's real carbon fiber, and the seats are real comfortable. That Tremec 6070 7-speed manual transmission, it shifts nicely. This is a car you can go out on a date and not embarrass yourself. It's fast, it's rough, it's brutally powerful, but it's actually pretty easy to drive. Push button start, let's turn it on. Now, this car has a custom Flowmaster exhaust, and when you're shopping for a pre-owned Corvette, you're going to see a lot of idiosyncrasies that are unique to each car. I'm a sucker for custom exhaust, and why is that? Well, because it sounds fantastic. Each Corvette has a personality all its own. This one has crazy low miles. It only has 20,000 miles for a 2014. It looks like brand new. It drives like brand new, never been smoked in, never been abused in any way. But if you're looking for a Corvette, do yourself the biggest favor in the world. Get a buyer's inspection at the dealer that sells it new. If it passes that inspection, my friend, let me tell you something. Take the plunge. It is as thrilling a car as you'll ever drive in your entire life. They're reliable. They have stupendous resale value, especially if you buy them pre-owned. They look sexy as all get out, and it'll be the most exciting thing you've purchased in a long, long time. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My name's Joe Tunney. You can reach me anytime at joeloveshawaii@gmail.com.